You're not going to see this planet the way the pilgrims do. We start where they start in orbit, looking down at a world where warships circle a single relic, and pilgrim ships sit waiting years just for permission to land. From there, we go down, past spaceports where most pilgrims think they've already arrived, and haven't, down roads that have been walked without stopping for thousands of years, into a city where entire families are born, live, and die, without ever once reaching the shrine they came for. Past walls almost nobody gets through, and underneath all of it, crypts, sealed vaults, and rooms most pilgrims don't even know exist. This is a shrine world, top to bottom, orbit first, the buried parts last. From orbit, a shrine world barely looks like a planet anymore. Thousands of ships form rings around it, running lights so dense they resemble a second constellation wrapped around the world itself. Some orbital anchorages are so crowded they resemble floating cities in their own right. Before anyone sets foot on the surface, they spend time just looking at it. On the largest and most famous shrine worlds, pilgrim fleets can spend months, sometimes years, waiting in orbit for permission to land. After years aboard a transport ship, that first glimpse of the planet is often the closest many pilgrims ever feel to the Emperor, long before they've set foot anywhere near a shrine. Pilgrim vessels are heavily screened before they're cleared checked for heresy, mutation, contamination, anything that could bring corruption down onto holy ground. With a constant stream of arrivals every year, that kind of screening backs up fast. On a shrine world, the ecclesiarchy carries enormous influence over who gets permission to approach the holy sites, working alongside the imperial authorities actually responsible for orbital traffic and defense. The delay itself isn't officially part of the pilgrimage. No ecclesiarch is likely to complain about it either in the Imperium. Hardship has always been treated as proof of devotion, rather than a problem that needs fixing. The Adepta Sororitas are a familiar presence around the shrines, and convince closer to the surface, though orbital defense itself usually falls to the Imperial Navy and the planet's own defense forces. Any ship that tried to bypass those protocols would find out fast that the response comes in the form of warships, not warnings. Here's what surprises most pilgrims. Some of them never actually reach the surface at all. They die waiting in orbit, and for many of the faithful, dying within sight of the holy world is considered a blessing on its own, close enough to count. This layer exists because the shrine world has become too important to allow uncontrolled access. Anyone can want to land here. Almost nobody gets to decide when. They haven't actually reached the shrine world yet. They've only reached its front door. Planetary Spaceports landing doesn't feel like arriving. It feels like entering another queue, just a bigger one. The landing fields on a major shrine world stretch for kilometers, thousands of pads, constant shuttle traffic, warehouses so vast they function as their own districts. This isn't an airport. It's a city built for one purpose, receiving pilgrims by the wave and moving them somewhere else. Control here is split across several authorities, not just one. Port officials manage traffic and scheduling. Administratum clerks handle the paperwork nobody sees, but everybody depends on. Planetary Defense Force troops and local Arbites handle ground security. With ecclesiarchy security woven through all of it, Imperial Navy personnel only take the lead where the spaceport itself doubles as a naval installation. On a shrine world, nothing moves without the ecclesiarchy's approval somewhere along the line. Every pilgrim goes through the same process before they're allowed further in. Identity checks, registration, cargo and luggage inspection, screening for mutation, disease, and anything that shouldn't be allowed near a holy site. Licensed psychers undergo additional screening of their own. Unsanctioned ones rarely make it this far alive. None of this is dramatic, it's routine, repeated identically for the millionth pilgrim as it was for the first. Customs works the same way trade does anywhere in the Imperium, just aimed at different cargo. Religious artifacts, tithes, sacred objects, and trade goods all get logged, taxed, or restricted depending on what they are and where they're headed. Once a pilgrim clears registration, they're given a destination, a route, and often a permit that restricts exactly where they're allowed to go from here, which matters more than it sounds. Because a shrine world this size can't just let uncountable crowds wander freely. Around the terminals, an entire economy has grown up to support them. Hostels, food vendors, transport companies, freight handlers, workers who spend their whole lives within sight of the landing fields, without ever going further inland. Here's the thing, most pilgrims get wrong. Landing isn't arriving. On many shrine worlds, the primary shrine is nowhere near the spaceport, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away, sometimes a journey of several days or weeks. The pilgrimage on the ground hasn't started yet. It's only just been allowed to begin. Leaving the spaceport doesn't mean reaching the shrine. It means entering the planet's transportation network, and the real journey now begins along the Pilgrim Roads leading toward the Holy City. Pilgrim Roads. Once pilgrims leave the spaceport, the road becomes the pilgrimage. On most shrine worlds, entire highways were built centuries ago for this exact purpose. Stone roads, processional avenues, mountain passes, and tunnels, all converging from different landing sites toward the same handful of destinations. Most pilgrims walk. Some travel in organized caravans. Others by ground transport or shuttle, where the terrain allows it, and on less developed shrine worlds, by whatever animal transport is available. However they move, the roads themselves are lined with reminders of why they're walking. Statues of imperial saints towering over the route, victory monuments, small wayside shrines, and chapels spaced out, so a pilgrim is never more than a day's walk from somewhere to pray. The infrastructure around the roads exists because a crowd this size can't just walk unsupported for weeks. Rest stations, water points, medical tents, and food distribution appear at regular intervals, backed up by a mix of Fraternitas militia patrols, local Planetary Defense Force units, and shrine wardens depending on how important the route is. Some of these waypoints started as nothing more than a checkpoint and grew into full seasonal markets, merchant districts, mobile clinics, shelter for travelers who can't keep pace with the rest. The strange part is how old these routes actually are. Many of the principal pilgrimage roads have been walked continuously for centuries, sometimes millennia, each generation following the exact path laid down by the ones before them. At that point, the road isn't just a road anymore. It's part of the sacred site itself, worn down by the same footsteps repeated for longer than most imperial records can even account for. Eventually, all of these roads converge on the same kind of destination, the largest settlements on the planet. Cities built almost entirely to receive the people walking toward them. The Pilgrim City. The Pilgrim City doesn't look like a city built for the people living in it. It looks like a city built to process everyone passing through. Endless districts of hostels, dormitories, and ecclesiarchy shelters. Streets that never fully empty because there's always another wave of worshippers arriving behind the last one. The markets here sell almost nothing that isn't tied to the journey. Food, travel supplies, candles, prayer books, icons, small souvenirs that prove someone actually made it this far. Medical facilities range from charity hospices to full pilgrim hospitals, because a journey this long produces exhaustion, illness, and injury in numbers that need dedicated infrastructure just to keep the roads moving. Ecclesiarchy offices handle registration and administration, tracking permits and destinations for a population that changes almost completely every few months. Nearly every business in the city depends on pilgrims in one way or another. Innkeepers, porters, guides, craftsmen, selling relics and travel gear, transport workers moving people and goods toward the Cathedral District. It's an economy built entirely around people who are, by definition, only passing through, except a lot of them don't. Behind all of that constant movement is a quieter truth. Illness, poverty, lack of transport, or simply waiting years for permission to approach the holiest sites keeps pilgrims here far longer than they planned. Some settle permanently. Over generations, entire families are born, raised, and buried in a city none of them originally meant to stay in. Beyond the Pilgrim City, stand the great cathedral districts, the religious and administrative center of the entire shrine world. The Cathedral District. This is where the architecture stops being practical and starts being a statement. Enormous cathedrals rise over the district, bell towers and spires visible from the roads long before a pilgrim actually reaches them, connected by processional avenues and plazas built to hold crowds the size of small cities. The district isn't just one building. It's basilicas, chapels, monasteries, convents and choir halls, each serving a different function inside the same religious complex. Behind the public-facing cathedrals sits the actual government of the shrine world. The cardinal's residence, ecclesiarchy administrative offices, archives, and the pilgrim administration that's been tracking arrivals since the spaceport. Seminaries and scriptoria train the next generation of priests and preserve the texts that keep the whole institution running. Daily life here runs on ritual. Bells mark the hours. Choirs and public sermons happen constantly, timed around processions that move through the plazas on a schedule most residents could recite from memory. Security is visible everywhere. Sisters of Battle and Fraternis Militia patrol constantly, and access past certain points is controlled no matter how far someone has already traveled to get there. Very few pilgrims stop to think about what's actually under their feet. The cathedral itself usually isn't the holiest place on the planet. It was built around, or above, something older, a tomb, a relic chamber, a martyrdom site, and everything visible from the plaza exists to surround and protect a location that's actually much smaller and much older than the building covering it. Beyond the cathedral lies the most restricted area on the shrine world, the Sacred Precinct, where access narrows down to only a small fraction of those who made it this far. The Sacred Precinct. This is where the journey stops feeling open. Massive defensive walls ring the precinct, broken only by monumental gates that control everything moving in or out. Inside, sacred plazas and processional courtyards give way to areas built for crowds that never fully clear, because for most pilgrims, this is the last stage before they find out whether they're getting any closer at all. Getting through means clearing multiple checkpoints, each one checking permits earned back at the spaceport months or years earlier. Entry runs on a schedule, and the schedule doesn't bend for anyone. Adepta Sororitas, Fraternis Militia, Ecclesiarchy Guards, Shrine Wardens, and local Arbites, where they're stationed, all work the gates together, and none of them are shy about turning people back. For pilgrims who make it this far, the experience narrows to lines, prayer areas, and designated spots to view whatever comes next. Nothing improvised, everything controlled. Almost nobody talks about how steep the drop-off actually is. Uncountable crowds complete the full journey to these walls. Only a fraction of them ever get past them to the shrine itself. Everything inside these walls exists to protect one location, the shrine. The main shrine, whatever it is, a saint's tomb, a martyrdom site, a relic, a chamber where something happened that nobody can fully explain. This is the reason every other layer exists. Reliquaries and altars surround it, sanctuaries, and inner chapels built in rings, with pilgrim galleries positioned to let crowds view it from a distance, without ever touching it directly. Access isn't uniform. Some pilgrims get a viewing gallery 100 meters out. A smaller number get closer. Clergy-only areas sit nearest the relic itself, and almost nobody outside the ecclesiarchy crosses that line. Daily services, processions, and public worship run on a fixed rhythm. With feast days drawing crowds, even the precinct struggles to hold. The questions are always the same. What's actually in there? How close can anyone really get? Who's allowed past the last gate? Is the relic even visible? Most days. That's not even the interesting part. The answer is often no. Many of the relics that made a shrine world famous are only briefly displayed on specific dates or stay sealed behind protective layers the rest of the year. The shrine everyone travels to see was usually built over something much older. Beneath the shrine, this is the part almost nobody in the crowd above knows exists. Beneath the visible shrine sits the original site, the first chapel, the first tomb, sometimes the actual battlefield or martyrdom chamber. The entire shrine world was eventually built to commemorate. Everything above it came later. Crypts, burial chambers, and ancient foundations extend downward, along with reliquary vaults and preservation rooms sealed off from public access entirely. On the oldest shrine worlds, this isn't a single hidden basement. It's centuries of construction, stacked on top of itself, each generation building its cathedral over the ruins of the one before it, without necessarily clearing out what came before. Behind all of this sits an uncomfortable irony. Pilgrims spend their entire lives trying to reach the shrine above ground. The oldest, most historically significant part of the world they traveled across the galaxy to see is sitting directly beneath their feet, and almost none of them will ever know it's there. Supporting a holy city like this one takes far more than priests and pilgrims. The hidden infrastructure, none of it works without this layer, and almost nobody visiting ever sees it. Power generation, water systems, waste processing, food storage, all of it running through maintenance tunnels, threaded underneath the Cathedral District and Pilgrim City alike. Worker districts house the people who keep it running, tucked away from the plazas and processions entirely. The workforce here isn't glamorous. Engineers, laborers, sanitation crews, mechanics and servitors handle the unglamorous end of keeping generation after generation of pilgrims fed, watered, and healthy enough to keep worshiping. Supplies move through warehouses and transport tunnels on a constant cycle. Food deliveries, power, construction material, repair crews, patching up infrastructure that never really stops being used. Behind all of that convenience is a simple trade-off nobody in the crowd above ever sees. Constant streams of pilgrims can only worship because a workforce just as large is keeping the city functioning every single hour. In tunnels, most of those pilgrims will never once walk through. Leave the holy city behind, and the shrine world starts looking surprisingly ordinary. Outer settlements. Not every part of a shrine world is holy ground. Beyond the Cathedral District and the Pilgrim Roads, most of the planet looks like any other imperial world, doing the work no religion can skip. Agricultural regions, mining settlements, manufactorums, hydroponics facilities, and civilian towns spread across the landscape. The people living out here aren't pilgrims, and mostly aren't clergy either. Farmers, factory workers, miners, and transport crews go about ordinary lives producing the food, fuel, and manufactured goods the rest of the planet depends on. Many of them will never once travel to the shrine their own world is famous for. Few pilgrims ever stop to consider how large this part of the planet actually is. The cathedrals and pilgrim roads get all the attention, but someone still has to grow the food and mine the ore that keeps the holy city running. And that work looks exactly like it does everywhere else in the Imperium. Even these ordinary regions fall under extraordinary protection. The defense network. A world this important doesn't get to rely on faith alone for protection. Orbital defense batteries and planetary defense lasers ring the most sacred sites, backed by fortress monasteries, sororitas convents, fraternities militia barracks, and planetary defense force bases spread across strategic points on the surface. Military checkpoints appear anywhere. The pilgrim routes pass near anything worth defending. Command runs through the same overlapping authorities that manage everything else here. ecclesiarchy leadership, working alongside imperial military structures, each with its own jurisdiction, but a shared interest in making sure nothing threatens the shrine itself. The real reason isn't the one most people assume. Shrine worlds aren't defended this heavily because of what they produce economically. They're defended because losing one can damage morale across entire sectors of the Imperium. A wound to belief spreads a lot further than a wound to supply lines. Even after 10,000 years, parts of these worlds remain forgotten. The forgotten places. Every shrine world, this old, has pieces of itself it's lost track of. Sealed catacombs, abandoned monasteries, destroyed cathedrals. From wars and disasters centuries past, collapsed tunnels, old cemeteries, underground ossuaries. Nobody has fully mapped. Some pilgrimage routes that were once walked by uncountable crowds have simply gone quiet, replaced by newer paths and left to the weather. Most of these places weren't sealed for any single dramatic reason: collapse, conflict, plague, or just centuries of neglect. Once a newer, more convenient route or building replaced them. What matters is that nobody's fully accounted for what's still down there. Are there relics still undiscovered in a sealed crypt from 3,000 years ago? Could an older, forgotten shrine be sitting directly beneath a newer one, the way the current shrine sits above its own original site? Even the ecclesiarchy doesn't claim to know every corner of its oldest shrine worlds. After thousands of years of expansion, rebuilding, and destruction, some places have simply been left behind, still there, still holy in theory, waiting for someone to remember they exist. That's the whole descent, orbit down to whatever's still sealed beneath the oldest cathedral floor. Every layer in between exists because of the same simple deal offered to billions of people across the Imperium. Travel far enough, endure enough, and something bigger than your own life might actually notice you. Most of the people who make up a shrine world will never see the layers we just walked through. The worker who spent 40 years in the maintenance tunnels will never file past the relic above. The farmer feeding the Pilgrim City will never make the pilgrimage himself. The pilgrim who finally reaches the Sacred Precinct still won't get past the last gate, and yet all of them keep showing up, keep working, keep believing the ground a few kilometers away is worth all of it, because somewhere in that belief, whether the miracle was ever real, stops being the point. A shrine world was never really one place. It's every layer at once: orbit, road, city, cathedral, crypt, and everything forgotten underneath, held together by nothing stronger than the idea that it matters. If you made the pilgrimage yourself, how far do you think you'd actually get before turning back? The Sacred Precinct, or somewhere on the road long before that?